seabed.
So this is the seabed here, this top reflection. So I think this is where the glacier came out. What is it that
pushes the ice?
The ancestors of people who are now Hopi and Navajo Indians occupied this extremely hostile terrain with hardly any water and managed to survive very, very extreme climatic events. If they can do that with their understanding of the world, entirely relying on intuition and direct observation, then we, who can draw the graphs that show us the climate 800,000 years ago, allows us to do something about it, because it's the same science, it's the same spirit of adventure and inquiry and discovery.
Noorderlicht. Hier kook, jullie me horen ook. Ja, het pik ons op dezelfde plaats als waar we afgezet zijn. Dat is de beste. Ja, dat is mooi. Dank je.
We've been at sea for just over a week now, and we're about 35 miles off the coast of Greenland. The problem is we can't really go much further in at the moment because there's so many icebergs. They're mainly sea ice that have broken off, but nonetheless, it's quite intimidating. The boat suddenly feels really small when you see these really huge bergs. So it's frustrating, you know, everyone's just desperate to put their feet on land. It's tantalizingly close, but we can't quite get there. Which I suppose, you know, if the sea levels rise, as they're predicted to do as climate change continues, there'll be a lot of people in this position, you know, in boats looking for somewhere where they can find some land. They, of course, may well have the sense to not be in the Arctic in a hurricane, frankly. Anyway, that's all from the holiday programme this week. Next week, Monty Don will be reporting from the Manchester Ship Canal, and I'll be in the Seychelles for a fortnight. I'm Gloria Honeyford. Thanks for watching.
Simon, it's kind of ironic, but both times we've run into ice with the Norderlich and have battled for our lives.
There's an irony that we have, because what's happening, of course, is as all the ice is melting to the North Pole, the winds are driving them south. And we just happen to have been in the two places where the ice is piling up. And so we're seeing out there this huge amount of ice, the meltwater, coming down past us and finally disappearing into the North Atlantic. As we increase carbon dioxide and our greenhouse gases, so we're warming the planet up. And the biggest barometer of that change is happening here today in the Arctic. To start with, the ocean currents depend on ice formation in winter. As ice forms, the ice itself is fresh water. And so as the ice forms, the cold, freezing water squeezes the salt out, and we get this very dense water mass, which sinks. And that sinking draws water from the Atlantic. That warm surface water is brought past Europe, past Britain, past Norway. And if that ice formation stops, it will affect the overturning of the oceans. and will affect the way in which the extension of the Gulf Stream, the currents, warm currents, are drawn to the Atlantic, past Britain, past Europe, and up to the high north. And that could stop, which means a dramatic change, climate change, not global warming, but climate change of a cooler climate in northwest Europe. It's going to affect not just people up here in the Arctic, but it's going to affect people over the whole world.
Good morning, sailors. It's a beautiful day in Disco Bay. You feel you're going to meet a glacier today. So, see you soon.
That is ridiculous. As a percentage, what are the odds of any one of these rolling over?
Oh, we're about 1 in 5, 1 in 4, you know.
Okay.
One reason why we are interested in coming here is because biogeochemically this is a really interesting part of the world, because the waters are very cold, so they are taking up CO2. So this is considered one of the largest carbon dioxide sinks on Earth. What we call ocean acidification is a result of increasing carbon dioxide levels. What happens is that we humans, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, have been putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and this carbon dioxide is in equilibrium with carbon dioxide in seawater. So the water is becoming more acidic, because as more CO2 enters the seawater, CO2 combines with water to form acid, carbonic acid, and these more acidic waters are becoming a concern for organisms like theropods. These are kind of like water butterflies. They have shells of chalky material called aragonite. As they feed, they move up and down in the water column, just like butterflies do. And they carry these shells that are highly susceptible to dissolution. And dissolution of the shells happens as a result of changes in chemistry of seawater.
The surface temperature is 1.27.
Yeah.
We've got a maxima sitting at about 12 metres of 3.17.
Okay. So what's the
2
depth
degree.
of the water column here?
Depth of the water column here, we've got it down to about 60 metres.
Okay, shall we go 30 meters, then we are
Okay.
sure. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
The idea with this is that we have the deeper sample that is warmer than the surface sample. So we expect to get the highest CO2 levels at the surface and declining with depth. This is what we are going to do. Okay, go. If we look at monitoring programs that are measuring the CO2 levels in the atmosphere and the CO2 levels in the ocean, we see a very consistent increasing trend of CO2 levels that is increasing at alarming rates. Although the levels of CO2 are not unprecedented in the history of Earth, the rate of increase is probably the fastest, well, it's definitely the fastest we have seen in human history, and probably the fastest that the Earth has seen in the last 50 million years. So it's, the big question is whether marine life is going to be able to adapt to these really fast changes.
I mean, we can just see it on the end. That's where the glacier was 20 years ago. So you can see it chase it all the way back. This whole sea would be glacier. This would be glacier all the way around here.
And now maybe a tenth of it in one little tongue coming down to the open water.
Yeah, and I don't think that'll last.
No.
What, 5 years? Come here and you go, there was a glacier here once.
You know, there was a great piece written by a man called Tom Utley, who proved that rising sea levels wouldn't be a problem by putting ice cubes in his gin and tonic. He said when you put the ice in and it melts, it doesn't run over the top, and therefore the melting ice is really not going to be a problem. Unless any of the ice that's on land melts. So, you know, it just like if that goes as well, then there may be a separate issue.
Yeah, but then there's ice outside the glass of gin and tonic, so it doesn't really
Yeah. That's someone else's drink.
Exactly.
Someone else's drink.
You know,
As long as Tom Utley's gin and tonic is safe,
all right.
I think we can be pretty certain that everything's going to be fine. I find that astonishing.
Probably the only way ordinary, sort of non-climate scientists like myself are ever going to really fully register the situation we're in is really to see the beauty of what we stand to lose. I have a vague sense that it's something I might write about. But the problem, if you're not a journalist, if it's not reportage, if you're looking for some way into this subject, you have to do it not, I think, in terms of landscape, you have to find the human angle. I thought maybe I should approach this as a dilemma, really, about long-term interests. We've got ourselves in a situation where we are having to address the needs of people unborn. Not our own children, maybe not even our children's children, but generations after that. Even the most idealistic of thinkers and actors on the world stage in the past have really addressed themselves to problems in the present. To bear the weight of the future in this way is both interesting and difficult, and runs probably counter to our nature. And so I was wondering if there was some way into this subject artistically that would look at it sympathetically from the point of view of that impulse in us that refuses to do this. Strange to say this, get on the polluter's side, as it were. I mean, that includes all of us. The consumer, the polluter, the despoiler. And we're all sort of weak and lazy and stupid in this respect.
The driver is no longer about oil running out per se. It's actually about we cannot carry on just burning it at the rate we are every year. And that's become a much stronger imperative, I think, in terms of influencing policy than a sort of longer-term consideration that the oil resource is limited. If you imagine the Earth wasn't inhabited by human beings, some aliens arrived and they wanted a source of energy. If they arrived in Orkney, would they go looking for oil and gas in the middle of the North Sea? Would they go looking to mine uranium? But would they not just look at the waves and tides and say that's the way to get energy? The positive thing, I think, is this generation is trying very hard now to leave a different inheritance in the energy mix of future generations. And maybe, part of that is going back to what is very obvious in terms of wind, waves, tides, and away from fossil fuels.